Chapter 81. Battered Jing Lin 3. The man said nothing and silently approached Jing Lin. His large hand grabbed the old man lying on the floor, as though picking up a chick, and ruthlessly tossed him to the side. Bang! The elderly man's body slammed against the door, his throat became sweet in an instant, and he sprayed out a mouthful of fresh blood. His complexion was livid due to rage. Yun Luo Feng, he roared savagely, glaring intensely at Yun Luo Feng with cruel eyes. Just then, a voice suddenly came through, breaking the mutual hostile atmosphere. Our elder Rong won't be seeing visitors today, so. Lin Xiao was about to make all the people present leave when he suddenly spotted Yun Luo Feng standing amongst the crowd and could not help but startle. Jing Lin was oblivious to this anomaly and scrambled to rise from the ground, his large hand caressing his injured chest, and his complexion was extremely unsightly. Shopkeeper Lin, someone's stirring up trouble at your medical pavilion, will you just ignore it? Lin Xiao knitted his brows, subconsciously looking at Yun Luo Feng, whose arms were folded across her chest. Yun Luo Feng's face was enigmatic as she stared at Lin Xiao with wickedly smiling eyes. Lin Xiao bitterly chuckled. Elder Rong's stance on Miss Yun was very obvious. Even if they had to give up on the imperial clan, they would still need to protect her safety. However, he couldn't gauge the attitude of Miss Yun at all. What if she did not want to reveal her brilliant aptitude in medicine, and he exposed her identity instead? He's terrified that he would cause her ire. Lamentably, Lin Xiao did not know that Yun Luo Feng's skill in medicine was already exposed last night. Our medical pavilion will settle this matter ourselves. Lin Xiao tightly furrowed his brows. All he wanted to do right now was to make Jing Lin leave. As for the other matters, they were not something he could question. Of course I believe in your medical pavilion's skill. When Jing Lin heard these words, he even thought the medical pavilion would give justice to him, and his aging appearance could not refrain from showing pleasure. But this Yun Luo Feng isn't only conceited and arrogant, she's also incomparably cunning. I'm afraid that your medical pavilion would be unknowingly deceived by her. Just like yesterday, she randomly hired an old man to pretend to be sick and then volunteered to save that old man. As a result, everyone believes that she has an outstanding talent in medicine, when in fact, she's still the same useless person like before. The corner of Yun Luo Feng's lips tilted up. She did not think that Jing Lin would go as far as making an excuse like an elderly man faking an illness just so he could convince himself that she could not really treat the old man. Lin Xiao. An old voice slowly traveled behind Lin Xiao. The medical pavilion inner hall's curtain was lifted, and two elderly men came out from it. One of the old men was dressed in a white robe, having the manner of an immortal and the bearing of an expert. The other old man wore a cyan robe, and his aging face showed an ailing appearance. A pretty young lady closely accompanied him on the side. The girl was currently lending her arm to support the cyan-robed old man to slowly come out. Elder Rong, Elder Ning. Lin Xiao turned to face the two elderlies, respectfully cupping his hands in salute. Humph, I don't know who dares to cause trouble at our medical pavilion. Quickly get lost already. Elder Rong's temperament was extremely volatile, his sight sweeping everyone in the main hall until it finally settled on Jing Lin. Jing Lin naturally was oblivious that the person that Elder Rong spoke of was him. He even thought that the other person was rebuking Yun Luo Feng. A touch of pleasure flashed through his eyes, and, thus, he roared at Yun Luo Feng, didn't you hear Elder Rong's words? Make yourself scarce from medical pavilion this instant. Medical pavilion will never welcome an arrogant person like you. Chapter 82. Battered Jing Lin 4. Yun Luo Feng folded her arms across her chest, her body leaning lazily against Yun Xiao's body. She raised her brow while looking at Jing Lin, whose face was fraught with anger. The one who should get lost here is you. Ho ho. Jing Lin snickered twice, the ridicule in his eyes became even more pronounced. I'm the Imperial clan's imperial physician, and you're just a trash that everyone disdains. Anyone would know that the person Elder Rong was referring to was you. And yet you still shamelessly stay here. You have the same conduct as your grandfather. That time, I already warned him, imperial physicians like us would never extend our hands to save Yun Qingye. In the end, he still shamelessly knelt on the ground and begged us. Humph, did he think that merely kneeling would help? No, even if he committed suicide in front of me, I still wouldn't help him. It could be said that Yun Luo Feng's state of mind, in the beginning, was still calm and insipid, but now her chest was rising and falling ruggedly. Just imagining the scene of grandfather desperately kneeling down at that time, her heart would surge with boundless fury. However, he did not receive any help despite having knelt, and instead, he suffered even more humiliation. Could you imagine a white-haired and aging old man helplessly kneeling in the biting, cold wind to save his son, and the people around him gave him nothing but derision and mockery? How heartrending and tragic was this? Compared with the humiliation that he suffered, he was more distressed by the grave injury of his son. If it were not for her second uncle luckily surviving, perhaps the old man would once again experience the pain of seeing his child die before his eyes. The entire medical pavilion became silent following Jinglin's words. Everyone could feel a burst of oppressive atmosphere, as though the surrounding air had frozen. Yun Xiao. Young Luo Feng's voice unhurriedly rung in the midst of this oppressive atmosphere. You said I shall avenge my own grudges. Only personally exacting my revenge will make me happy. Just now, no one else felt it, but young Luo Feng clearly sensed the desire to kill from Yun Xiao. She was aware that Yun Xiao undoubtedly possessed an intent to kill. Were it not for her words, Jinglin's head would probably be separated from his body in the next moment. Even so, was this something she desired? No. This was by no means the result that she wanted. Jinglin was most proud of his own medical expertise. Only by ruthlessly stepping on his medical expertise would he succumb to an endless despair. Jinglin, you stood aside and watched someone die, and it wasn't your wrong. But you helped Mu family, and that's where you've committed a grave mistake. I can forgive you for leaving someone to die, but I can't forgive you for consorting with the Mu family. Young Luo Feng's gaze was bewitching and righteous as she slowly walked towards Jinglin. Jinglin sneered, raising his head to watch young Luo Feng. Just as he met the girl's black eyes, there was a rumble in his mind, as though his spirit received a hard blow, and his entire body could not help but quiver. Slap. A slap heavily landed on Jinglin's face, a bewitching and arrogant voice reached his ears. This slap, you are standing as a substitute for the Mu family to pay my parents back. Slap. Yet another slap. Jinglin's mind was in a daze, utterly incapable of responding. This slap is on behalf of my grandfather. You can witness the death of a person and do nothing, but you don't have the right to humiliate an old father who yearned to save his son. Slap. A slap heavily struck once again. Jinglin felt gold stars flashing in front of his eyes, and his whole person became lightheaded. It looks like you also think you committed a crime, so you aren't dodging or evading. Since it's like this, I will reward you with a few more slaps. Wasn't it like that? In the eyes of everyone, it was because Jinglin was too ashamed that he did not dodge nor evade Yun Luo Feng's slaps. However, no one was aware of the impact that also came from the depths of his spirit at that instant. Chapter 83. Elder Rong Getting Angry 1. Jinglin regained his senses with great difficulty and had just realized that he had been slapped several times by Yun Luo Feng in public surrounded by numerous spectators. He grew incredibly furious in an instant. Yun Luo Feng, you actually dared to be impertinent here in Medical Pavilion. You must immediately kowtow and admit your mistakes to me, otherwise, I definitely won't forgive your behavior today. Yun Luo Feng accepted the handkerchief that Yun Xiao handed over, carefully wiping the hand that she just used to slap Jinglin, as though Jinglin's face had some bacteria contaminating her hand. Yun Luo. Jinglin clenched his fists in rage, but before he could angrily rebuke her, Elder Rong's impatient voice was heard from the side. What are you still doing here? You dare to stir up trouble at my medical pavilion, so why aren't you getting lost instantly? Jinglin resolutely swallowed back the mouthful of rage that he was about to spew forth. His haughty gaze landed on Yun Luo Feng's bewitching and beautiful appearance. He coldly snorted, for now, I will consider Elder Rong's face and let you off the hook. Don't tell me you didn't hear Elder Rong's words. Scram. After hearing these words, Yun Luo Feng did not make any movements, and her eyes smilingly looked at Jinglin. Jinglin became even more disdainful. He had seen people with thick skin before, but never had seen one to this degree. Elder Rong's words were already expressed this bluntly, yet she actually shamelessly continued to stay here. She indeed proved herself as Yun Luo's granddaughter, even the extent of her insensitivity could not be matched by anyone. Just as Jinglin wanted to scorn at her more, Elder Rong spoke again. Jinglin, I'm telling you to scram, don't tell me you didn't hear me. Jinglin was about to speak, but because of Elder Rong's impatient speech, he choked on his words, nearly losing his breath and hiccuping. Suddenly coughing twice, his old face turned beet red as he stared at Elder Rong with dull eyes. Elder Rong, the person that you were referring to was me. He pointed at himself, looking incredulous. Elder Rong indifferently said, who else would it be besides you? I, Elder Rong, have never seen anyone thick-skinned to this degree in my entire life. I already told you to get lost twice, yet you're still in my medical pavilion. These words were what Jing Lin had used to mock young Luo Feng, but they were now returned to him by Elder Rong. Jing Lin's body froze, and his complexion turned pale as he stuttered. Elder Rong, the one who came to the medical pavilion to cause trouble was clearly young Luo Feng. Ha ha, Elder Ning chuckled, his eyes, which were neither cold nor warm, stared intently at Jing Lin. Us two old men, only saw you relying on your force to harass people and bullying that girl. Now that you've been beaten, could it be that you're still counting on medical pavilion to stand up for you? Elder Rong told you to scram, so you should immediately get lost from the medical pavilion already. Otherwise, even if Elder Rong doesn't do anything, this old crock won't let you off. Jing Lin's face turned from white to green and from green to red again. He took a deep breath and gave a hollow laugh. Elder Rong, you must have misunderstood. I didn't bully this girl like a giant bullying an ant. It was her who had someone beat me. So the person who's causing trouble isn't me, but it's actually this girl. Even now, Jing Lin still could not quite make sense of the situation, so he thought it was only due to young Luo Feng's young age that Elder Rong believed he was bullying her. Elder Rong, this girl is too insidious and cunning. Last night, she found an old guy to feign injury in a futile attempt to deceive everyone. Thankfully, my disciple possessed brilliant medical skills, so she had long realized that the old guy was just pretending. So not only did my disciple not wake up that unconscious old man, she also didn't expose her for the sake of their old friendship. Chapter 84. Elder Rong getting angry too. Jing Lin exposed a smile, glancing haughtily at the stoic young Luo Feng behind him. At the moment, he was still oblivious that the two old men's darkening expression was due to his words. Except neither of the two spoke just yet because they still wanted to hear what he was going to say next. Jing Lin mistakenly believed that the two elderly men agreed with his words and thus continued to speak. Someone who's treacherous, cunning and extremely daring like her simply cannot be generously treated. I understand that the two of you are only helping her because she's still young, I just don't want the two of you to be blinded by her. Elder Ning smiled faintly, his smile cold and distant. In the boisterous main hall of Medical Pavilion, his voice was slowly heard. This one, you must be the master of that Mu Wushwang from yesterday. Jing Lin was taken back for a moment, looking at Elder Ning with astonishment. He lightly furrowed his brows. I am indeed Mu Wushwang's master, but I don't know who this venerable senior is. Me, Elder Ning faintly smiled. This old crock is the deceitful old man whom you referred to as faking an illness yesterday. As though struck by lightning, Jing Lin's entire body trembled involuntarily. His appalled gaze centered on the elderly man standing in front of Elder Rong. Elder Ning was not from Longyuan, so it was understandable that Jing Lin did not recognize him. However, he saw that this senior was together with Elder Rong, so he concluded that the old man must be someone with some status and did not dare to act rashly from the start. Could it be that the old man, whom Wushwang met yesterday, was the person in front of him? Elder Ning, ignoring Jing Lin, Elder Rong looked at Elder Ning with astonishment and asked, the famous doctor that you spoke of earlier is Uniato. That's correct. Elder Ning nodded and glanced at Elder Rong with a strange expression. What is it? Don't tell me you don't believe that this girl possesses such a high level of medical skill. Elder Rong bitterly chuckled and helplessly said, I definitely have confidence in her medical skills. After all, the godly doctor that I told you about just now is also her. It's ridiculous that we actually wanted to compare whose acquainted doctor is more outstanding in medicine. Listening to these two old men's conversation, young Luo Feng lightly raised her brow, a faint smile touched her lips. So it turned out that these two old men actually wanted to use her to compete. Elder Rong also apparently found that he misspoke, but it was already too late for him to take it back, so he chuckled dryly. Uniato, this Elder Ning and I have known each other for many years and like to compete about everything, so don't take it to heart. What's more, we are unable to compete now that it has come to this. It's not like we can let you compete with yourself, right? Oh. The smile on young Luo Feng's face became even more bewitching as she raised her brow to look at the explaining Elder Rong. Elder Rong's expression became increasingly embarrassed. He was momentarily hasty in his speech and did not imagine that he would verbalize the secret between them just like that. More importantly, it was even in front of young Luo Feng. If at first Elder Ning's words were like lightning that struck and stupefied Jing Lin in an instant, then after hearing Elder Rong's next words, he was already so utterly dumbfounded that he could not clearly hear any of the other party's subsequent words. In his mind, there was only a voice echoing. Was Yun Luo Feng, this trash, truly proficient in medicine? This was simply more preposterous than an ant raping an elephant. Jing Lin, since you aren't willing to leave, I can only throw you out. In order to divert his embarrassment, Elder Rong turned his gaze to Jing Lin and coldly ordered, "Someone, come and throw Jing Lin out of the door for me. From now on, my medical pavilion will no longer welcome anyone from the Imperial clan for eternity." Chapter 85. Elder Rong Getting Angry 3. As Master Rong orders. As soon as Elder Rong uttered these words, several men clad in black robes appeared from the shadow of medical pavilion. These black-clothed men grabbed hold of Jing Lin's arms and legs and lifted him like a dead pig. They left the medical pavilion and tossed his body on the street in a parabolic path. Bang! All of Jing Lin's limbs were pointing towards the sky. He was entirely covered with dirt and cut a sorry figure. This caused all the pedestrians on the street to halt and watch from the sidelines. At this moment, Jing Lin finally shook himself off from the intense blow and scrambled up from the ground. He did not even have the time to dust off the dirt on his body before he fled in a battered state. Elder Rong, Elder Ning. Inside the medical pavilion, young Luo Feng's complexion was somewhat unhappy as she said dispiritedly, "I'm a bit tired today. If you want me to treat your illnesses, send someone to the general estate tomorrow. I'll treat you at the general estate." Elder Rong was momentarily stunned and wanted to urge young Luo Feng to stay, but before he could say his piece, he was pulled by Elder Ning next to him. Elder Ning shook his head at him, and he shifted his amiable eyes to Yun Luo Feng. "Miss Yun, go back and rest well. We will look for you at the general estate tomorrow." "Okay." Yun Luo Feng did not respond, hooked her arms around Yun Xiao's neck, and closed her eyes gently. "Yun Xiao, take me back." Yun Xiao pursed his thin lips, bent down, carried Yun Luo Feng in his arms, and walked out of the medical pavilion in huge strides. That damned Jing Lin. After Yun Xiao left with Yun Luo Feng in his arms, Elder Rong could no longer suppress his rage and finally exploded. "I've already made an agreement with Uniato today. In the end, it's all because Jing Lin was seeking trouble that it angered Uniato to leave, causing Darren's treatment to be delayed again." The way Elder Rong saw it, if it weren't for Jing Lin, Yun Luo Feng would not have left like this. Even if Jing Lin suffered a loss here, it still did not eliminate the fury in his heart. Suddenly, Elder Rong appeared to have thought of something as he walked to the cabinets where the medical pavilion stored its medicinal herbs. With a crashing sound, all valuable medicinal ingredients were flung onto the ground by him. After thinking a bit, he also picked up a bottle of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid and smashed it onto the ground. Crash! The bottle filled with spirit-gathering medicinal liquid shattered into smithereens, leading to the snow-white spirit-gathering medicinal liquid to splatter on the ground and quickly evaporate into thin air. Elder Rong. Elder Ning was stupefied for a moment and upon recovering, he bellowed furiously, "Have you gone insane?" Elder Rong ignored Elder Ning's outburst and ruthlessly stepped on the medicinal herbs on the ground until all of the valuable medicinal herbs were trampled beyond recognition. Then he took a deep breath and his cold eyes swept over everyone in the medical pavilion. No one is allowed to disclose a single word about today's matter, especially anything about Uniato. If anyone leaks even a little bit, you will definitely be pursued to death by my medical pavilion. Everyone could not help but shiver as they swore, "Elder Rong, don't worry, even if we die, we won't reveal a single word." "Great." Elder Rong nodded with satisfaction. "I also want all of you to spread a piece of news. You will say that Jing Lin made things difficult for the General Estate's eldest Miss, Yun Luo Feng, at my medical pavilion, but Miss Yun's guard protected her, thus causing him to fail. However, during his skirmish with that guard, he ruined my medical pavilion's medicinal herbs, and even the precious spirit-gathering medicinal liquid was not spared from his violent act." It was only now that it dawned on Elder Ning what Elder Rong wanted to do, and he could not help but become stupefied. Domineering. This was way too domineering. As expected, you could offend anyone but Elder Rong, this old man. Otherwise, when he dug a hole for someone, it would be to go after their life. Chapter 86. Elder Rong Getting Angry 4. Lin Xiao, I will list a bill later, and then you can bring it to the Imperial Palace and make Jing Lin compensate according to the damage. If I don't make him lose his fortune, then my name isn't wrong. Elder Rong's eyes were spitting fire as he said through gritted teeth. Elder Ning helplessly shook his head. I was just thinking that you were angered to craziness by Jing Lin. I didn't think that you would actually use this type of method to dig a hole for him. With the pressure from your medical pavilion, Jing Lin wouldn't dare to not compensate. Humph. Elder Rong coldly harumphed. Who let Jing Lin, that old bastard, anger Uniato away? How can I not make him let out some blood? Now you will go spread this news. My medical pavilion will take responsibility for everything, so Jing Lin wouldn't dare to do anything to you. But if I find out that you helped Jing Lin, don't blame my medical pavilion for being merciless. A harsh light flitted across Elder Rong's eyes, and his voice was cold and grave. Grandfather, Ning Xin lent her arm to support Elder Ning and said with a smiling expression, with Elder Rong avenging Miss Yun, you can be reassured. But this Jing Lin is truly bringing disaster upon himself. Elder Ning smiled wryly as he said, Exener, you're correct. With Elder Rong taking care of it, who still needs this old guy? He's merely the Imperial clan's royal physician, so if I took care of it, then that would truly be thinking too highly of him. When he uttered the last sentence, Elder Ning's typically indifferent appearance took an air of arrogance. As Ning family's family head, he naturally had the right to be arrogant. This point was indisputable. Yun residence. Ever since Yun Luo Feng was brought back by Yun Xiao, the entire Yun residence was in an uproar. Qingyan hurriedly sent someone to inform Yun Luo, and then closely followed Yun Xiao in entering the rear mountain. However, without waiting for Qingyan to step into the room's door was fiercely slammed shut with a bang, nearly injuring Qingyan's little nose. She stood outside of the door with a face full of resentment and muttered, now that Miss has Yun Xiao attending to her, she doesn't need this servant anymore. Miss values lovers over friends as expected. Forget it, I should better go wait for General to return instead. Inside the room, Yun Luo Feng watched the man standing at the entrance, tightly knitting her brows. Yun Xiao, leave as well. Yun Xiao did not move, his cold eyes were intently watching the young lady's somewhat pale complexion. Earlier. Did you forcefully raise your strength? Yun Luo Feng closed her eyes weakly. Her strength was only at early level spirit cultivator, intermediate rank, but Jing Lin was at middle level, low rank. They had an entire 2-rank difference between them. The reason why Yun Luo Feng was able to hit him while he remained immobile was due to the God Code strength that she borrowed to forcefully raise her spiritual strength. Thus, she could use the spirit to attack Jing Lin, causing him to lose his mind for a short time. Of course, this method had a consequence that was neither light nor heavy. This consequence was that when Yun Luo Feng's spirit strength regained its original state, it would make her spirit extremely weak. Hence, she had to have Yun Xiao bring her back. Yun Luo Feng opened her eyes unhurriedly, her voice was devoid of its former arrogance as she weakly said, I'm fine, leave first. This time, the typically obedient Yun Xiao did not comply with Yun Luo Feng. Not only did he not leave, but he actually walked in front of her. His eyes watched her solemnly and drawled in a magnetic voice, why didn't you let me do it? Yun Luo Feng lifted her eyes, regarding the man standing beside her. I wanted to do it myself. There were no other reasons except for the desire to teach Jing Lin a lesson herself, even if it led to her weakened spirit. Your strength only belongs to you, it doesn't belong to me. Yun Xiao, do you understand? If you need. The man's grim eyes stared intently at Yun Luo Feng. My strength can also belong to you. Chapter 87. Spies from the Palace 1. In her past life, Yun Luo Feng once read a saying on the internet that made her incredibly moved. The saying went like this, if you want to kill someone, then I will help you hold your sword. Although the current Yun Xiao did not say this sentence, the meaning behind his words was the same as these familiar words. Yun Luo Feng's heartstring was tugged at that moment. She lifted her eyes to stare at the cold, gorgeous man in front of her, her bright eyes extremely grave. Yun Xiao, what if I don't need your strength and was determined to do it by myself? Yun Xiao furrowed his brows, clearly pondering on Yun Luo Feng's question. A long while later, he looked at Yun Luo Feng again with determination in his pair of cold eyes. I can help you restrain his arms and legs so that he would be incapable of resisting, and then you can vent your anger as much as you want, the man responded to Yun Luo Feng's question in a deadly earnest manner. His expression was completely solemn and serious, making one feel that he was capable of doing what he said. "Yun Xiao, why do you treat me so well?" asked young Luo Feng. Her profound eyes were gazing at Yun Xiao. Yun Xiao pursed his thin lips, his cold eyes were fixated all along on young Luo Feng. "I don't know, but what I understand is I want to protect you. I want to protect you." These 5 words made every nerve of young Luo Feng quiver. She massaged her forehead, assaulted with a slight headache, and weakly said, "Yun Xiao, if you're done talking, then leave. I would like to quietly rest my body." Yun Xiao silently took 2 steps towards young Luo Feng again, still going against her command. "Yun Xiao." Seeing such a disobedient Yun Xiao, young Luo Feng's brows lifted imperceptibly. She raised her head to look at the man's cold appearance, however, right at that moment, the man's warm palm had already landed on her chest. Young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes slightly, a dangerous glint flickering across her eyes. She did not expect that a pure and innocent man like Yun Xiao would take the initiative to attack her. Just as young Luo Feng was about to tease this man, a warm feeling slowly flowed from her chest into her spirit. She could feel that her previously weakened spirit was gradually recovering. Only then did young Luo Feng realize that this man was not making a move on her but was nourishing her spirit for her instead. At this time, the man in front of her had his palm pressed against her chest. Seeming to be able to feel the young lady's soft body, a strange sensation acutely surfaced in his heart in an instant. That feeling was somewhat irrepressible, like a volcano on the verge of erupting. However, he quickly calmed his breathing down and treated young Luo Feng's injured spirit with single-hearted devotion. "Master, I've long told you not to use this method to raise your spiritual strength, but you just won't listen." Xiao Mo's resentful voice traveled inside her mind. "If you want me to forgive you, you will devour Yun Xiao cleanly right now. In any case, this kid still hasn't experienced that yet, so you're not the one losing." Young Luo Feng did not pay heed to Xiao Mo's prattle. However, Xiao Mo possessed a persistent heart and continued nagging incessantly, "Master, don't you want to become stronger? You now have a quick shortcut to becoming strong. You just have to consume this little tormenting minx in front of you, then you can become strong." Little tormenting minx. Young Luo Feng nearly spurted out a mouthful of blood. She sized Yun Xiao, who was in front of her, up. No matter what, she could not associate this cold man with the word, minx. Chapter 88. Spies from the Palace 2. "What's the matter?" Yun Xiao saw young Luo Feng regarding him with a very strange expression and lightly furrowed his brows. "Yun Xiao, has anyone ever told you that you are extremely delicious?" It had to be said that the man in front of her indeed possessed the ability to captivate people. His utterly stunning appearance and his exquisitely perfect facial features, not a single one did not entice people to commit a crime. Especially that 8-pack abs, it was absolute perfection. If he stripped his clothes and went outside, the muscles on his chest would probably be groped until it became thoroughly smooth. Yun Xiao looked towards young Luo Feng with some astonishment, as though not understanding why she would suddenly say that. No, after thinking for a moment, Yun Xiao honestly answered young Luo Feng's question. There really was no one who would dare to speak with him like this. Once his status was out in the open, even those women, who had never seen his appearance under the mask, would actively seek him out. But those women did not survive. Young Luo Feng watched Yun Xiao's rather uncomfortable appearance and burst out laughing all of a sudden. "Yun Xiao, just how much longer will you keep laying your hand on my chest?" She cast a glance at Yun Xiao's hand, which was still pressing against her chest, and a bewitching amusement appeared in her black eyes. Yun Xiao's expressionless face grew rigid for a bit before he retracted his hand and coldly stated, "Your body is already fine, so I shall take my leave." After saying these words, he turned around and headed out of the door. No matter how steady his steps were, young Luo Feng was able to still see a trace of panic. Looks like this guy isn't completely clueless about the affair between men and women. Young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes as she stared at Yun Xiao's retreating silhouette, her smile revealing a trace of bewitching charm. He's just lacking a bit of training. The entire Yun residence was aware that the Yun family's eldest miss, young Luo Feng, was carried back by Yun Xiao. So when young Luo, who was currently outside conversing with someone while drinking tea, heard about this matter, he hurriedly left behind everyone and rushed back to the general estate. Only after seeing a safe and sound young Luo Feng did he release a sigh of relief. However, even though young Luo Feng did not suffer from any harm, the typically protective of the weak old man still exploded with fury. If it weren't for young Luo Feng restraining him, he would have already burst into the imperial palace to settle the score with Jing Lin. At the same time, the entire imperial city of Longyuan was in an uproar. The reason was none other than Jing Lin making things difficult for Yun family's eldest miss at the medical pavilion and even damaging the medical pavilion's property, leading the medical pavilion's elder to fly into a rage and send someone to enter the palace to settle accounts with Jing Lin for the damaged medicinal herbs. Jing Lin had unspeakable bitter suffering. What could he say? That he was wrongly accused? Who would believe him? As such, he could only swallow the pain and silently bring forward all of his fortunes to compensate the medical pavilion. Within a night, Longyuan's prestigious imperial physician, Jing Lin, became a pauper in the truest sense of the word. The current him could not even afford medicinal herbs. While Longyuan was engulfed in this storm, the culprit, young Luo Feng, was peacefully cultivating in her home, undisturbed by external affairs. Rear Mountain. Young Luo Feng settled herself inside the bathtub, slowly opening her eyes. She exhaled a mouthful of foul air and said, "Xiao Mo, I already broke through to early level advanced rank spirit cultivator." Humph. Xiao Mo was still making a fuss over young Luo Feng's willfulness, his tone carrying resentment. "If you just listen to me and dual cultivate with Yun Xiao, you would have already reached intermediate level spirit cultivator by now." Young Luo Feng's face darkened. This little guy truly would not let it go until he had his way. "Forget it, we won't discuss the matter of cultivating anymore. The mission that I gave milk tea earlier should already be completed." Chapter 89. Spies from the Palace 3. Squeak. Just as young Luo Feng mentioned the gold-seeking hamster, milk tea, a call drew her attention. Not long after, she saw a little, milky white hamster making its way inside through the crack of the door, calling young Luo Feng with its squeak. "Did you finish digging the underground training ground?" Young Luo Feng held milk tea in her palm and asked, "Did you leave behind the 3 big pits that I told you to retain?" Squeak. Milk tea nodded its head frantically, blinking its eyes at young Luo Feng, and tried to act cute as if it was asking for a reward. "What about those people that I had you supervise? How did it go?" All this time, milk tea worked to excavate the underground training ground in the morning and was responsible for supervising the recruits at night. Of course, as a reward, young Luo Feng did not treat it unfairly, and every day, she rewarded it with a spirit-gathering medicinal liquid. Squeak. Milk tea nodded its head once again, earnestly looking at young Luo Feng. "This is your reward for today." Young Luo Feng picked up a vial of spirit-gathering medicinal liquid and tossed it to milk tea. Milk tea hastily held the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid and used its teeth to tear the lid open, gulping down the medicinal liquid. Gold-seeking hamsters were different from humans. Its cultivation relied on endlessly devouring medicinal herbs. And this spirit-gathering medicinal liquid that was created from medicinal herbs was naturally its food. However, compared with the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, its longing for the spiritual herbs from a few days ago was more intense. Squeak, squeak. After it finished drinking the spirit-gathering medicinal liquid, milk tea smacked its mouth and called young Luo Feng a couple times while excitedly gesticulating with its hands and feet. "Master, it is saying that it witnessed a man leaving General Estate covertly once, and after following him, it discovered that man sending a letter to an old man with an effeminate voice," Xiao Mo faintly spoke to explain as though understanding the confusion in young Luo Feng's heart. "Apparently, the little guy here has yet to cool his temper." An effeminate voice. Young Luo Feng lightly stroked her chin and chuckled. Besides the palace's eunuchs, there isn't anyone with a voice that's too effeminate. As expected, it appears that the emperor doesn't trust the general estate and planted a spy here. Milk tea, lead the way. I want to go see that person. The reason why she bided her time these past days was to lure out the spies from the palace. It was clear that the spies had lost their patience and revealed their aim this quickly. Squeak, squeak. Milk tea cheerfully called twice and scurried down from young Luo Feng's palm, and swiftly flew out the door while swinging its little butt. Young Luo Feng did not think twice before closely pursuing it. At this moment, people were crowded to a bursting point inside the dim and damp stone room. The entire 200 people dwelling inside the stone room, the degree of crowding could be imagined. After experiencing young Luo Feng's neglect these past few days, these people were already becoming impatient. If not for General Estate's considerable salary, why else would they stay in a prison like this? Amidst everyone's boisterous discussion, a laid-back voice was suddenly heard, leading everyone's conversation to an abrupt stop. It looks like you guys were doing quite well these past few days, considering that you still have the energy to talk loudly. The girl's back was leaning against the stone wall, her completely spotless white clothes was in contrast to this dusky stone room. A languid and wicked smile was displayed on her peerlessly beautiful appearance as her dark eyes quietly regarded the suddenly quiet crowd. Miss Yun, a dissatisfied voice was heard from the crowd, after recruiting us, you left us here and paid no heed to us. Just what do you want to do? Were we brought here just so you could treat us this way? Chapter 90. Spies from the Palace 4. Young Luo Feng lightly raised her brow, her gaze turning slightly towards the person who spoke. It was a handsome youth with delicate eyebrows, which were somewhat knitted from dissatisfaction. Perhaps due to staying in this stone room devoid of sunlight these past few days, his cheeks were close to becoming a translucent white. It was obvious that he was young, but his eyes contained a feeling of having experienced the vicissitudes of life. What's your name? Young Luo Feng looked at the handsome youth and asked with upturned lips. The handsome youth did not expect that young Luo Feng would notice him this swiftly, so he was stunned for a moment. His eyes wandered around in a circle as he said, Yi Ling. My name is Yi Ling. What I want is your real name. Tell me, what is your real name? Young Luo Feng folded her arms across her chest, though her tone bore no trace of impatience. The youth was startled, his eyeball continued to wander as he insisted, Yi Ling is my real name. Well then, let me change the question, where did you go last night? Young Luo Feng watched the youth while smiling. Her black eyes seemed to be capable of discerning everything. Nothing could escape her scrutiny. The youth's face began to sweat. When he left yesterday, no one was trailing after him, so why would young Luo Feng ask him this question? She was definitely pulling his leg on purpose. What the youth did not know was, indeed, no one was following him last night, there was only a little hamster sneaking behind him. Yi Ling, young Luo Feng's smile became more pronounced. Reportedly, a few years ago, Lujin Kingdom was defeated. In order to seek peace, they sent Lujin Kingdom's most talented third prince, Yi Ling, as a pawn. Third prince was originally the next generation's sovereign but suffered the fate of being a pawn. Therefore, I want to ask, should I call you Yi Ling or third prince? The youth's complexion transformed dramatically, his eyes staring at young Luo Feng in horror. You. How did you know? Wasn't the General Estate's eldest miss useless? How was she able to discern his identity? When Crown Prince first sent you all to General Estate, I didn't notice you, and yet you could not remain calm. When you went to meet with a eunuch from the palace yesterday, you were discovered by my people. Young Luo Feng gently patted Milk Tea's little head, smiling faintly with lowered eyes. Of course, if you casually came up with a name when I asked you just now, I would have had no way of knowing you were Yi Ling. However, you actually used the name, Yi Ling, to deceive me. She paused and looked up at the youth's deathly white face. Lujin Kingdom's Empress Yi is your mother. It is difficult to go undetected by using this name. I'm only curious, just what terms did that person from the Imperial Palace use to make you do his bidding? Yi Ling chuckled wryly. Young Luo Feng, they all say you are trash and that you only dare to abuse your power by relying on the General Estate's name. Unfortunately, the world is blind, no one was able to see through you. You are correct, I am Yi Ling. The Emperor promised me that after staying in your estate for a full 2 years, he will let me go back to my kingdom. Not to mention, if it weren't for young Luo, that old man, Lujin Kingdom would not be defeated, and I wouldn't become a hostage. A touch of hatred flashed through Yi Ling's eyes as he coldly spoke. Yi Ling, do you think this is really my grandfather's fault? Young Luo Feng sneered. I admit, my grandfather used to be foolishly loyal, completely obedient to that dog emperor's commands. However, it was not of his own volition. The one you should truly hate is that dog emperor. What's more, the reason why you became a hostage, I'm afraid you know better than anyone.